Okay, welcome everyone to Uranus and Taurus transiting through the ninth and 10th houses. Before we get started, first of all, here's our little housekeeping slide that shows you the different ways you can study with us here at EAN. And if you want any more information, you can give us a phone call or go to our website and contact us, and Leroy will be happy to help you work your way through the website and any details of anything you want to study with us. Here's the dates of Uranus in Taurus. As you can see, 2018 is going to be a transition year. Uranus will actually dip into Taurus for 6 months, and then it will go back into Aries for another 6 months before about a year from now when it goes into Taurus for the next 7 years. Here are the key points we've been looking at as Uranus transits through Taurus. Revolutionizing self-reliance via exposing any securities, evolving our inner relationship with ourself and our environment, any sexuality shakeups and revolutions, survival instincts for evolving all of our species. Of course, as many of us are interested in, revolutionizing our relationship to our resources. And this will be done mainly through the evolution of our values, which is one of the key words for Taurus. Do you want more information? I point you towards Uranus and Taurus Part 1 on archetypes and cycles, where we went into all these key points here in more detail. And over the long term, Uranus and Taurus is going to show that potential to develop new talents, another Taurian key word, allowing us to develop those new talents into jobs, career, and resource accumulations. Of course, some of the distortions of Uranus in Taurus is not making any effort, falling into laziness or inertia, manipulation and possessiveness, withdrawing and being the hermit, and of course, hoarding resources and money or being excessively materialistic. And the opposite of hoarding is starvation. Taurus is survival, not only for each of us individually, but for species as well. So we could see some species die off here due to human-made conditionings on planet Earth. Here is the Scorpio polarity for Uranus and Taurus, and these key points will be emphasized whenever Uranus is retrograde, which is once a year for about 5 months out of the year. Again, part 1, the cycles webinar will give you more details in regards to these key points. But that Scorpio polarity will create the necessary cataclysms to expand our individual and collective perspectives of the universe. It can bring along resource upsets and redistributions, which means equitable sharing of our resources. Once again, on planet Earth, we've reached extremes of wealth inequality, where, for instance, in the United States, 3 individuals have as much wealth as the bottom half of the individuals in our country, which means about 165 million people have as much wealth combined equal to Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, and Jeff Bezos with Amazon. There can be triggering ethical debates over technology because Uranus is always moving us forward technologically, and spirituality and morality are always trying to play catch up with this technology. A lot of these ethical debates will come along species and all the gene manipulating we can do with various species, designer genes in regards to having children, or playing around with other species and manipulating them into something else entirely. We can have sexual scandals and, of course, the possibility of any STD contagions. And because Scorpio is the water element, I think that we will not only see the physical Taurus earth events such as earthquakes be more in the news. We'll see the Scorpio polarity of water and the necessity of having clean water on planet Earth, especially through any and all Earth events, be they hurricanes, volcanoes, earthquakes, the storms we've been having over the last week. Distortions, of course, here are those famous power grabs, the power over, power under. There can be outright stealing or manipulating of money and resources. There can be those Scorpio betrayals or gaming the system. We can also have excessive misuse of resources here as well. Now, this slide I'm putting up in all of the 12 house transits because almost everyone born on planet Earth between 1932 through 1915 has Uranus-Pluto within a 180-degree swing. The 90 degrees of last quarter and balsamic phase to Pluto. You can see dates on your screen here. This is where we are bringing up old traumas, Uranus, and making every effort we can to resolve and heal those old traumas so they're no longer triggering us as intensely and controlling our world. And of course, then we have Uranus new phase and crescent phase to Pluto up until these first quarter squares. And this is where we are still trying to break free and liberate ourselves, learn how to be uniquely who we are. We're still healing trauma no matter which one of these 4 phases we look at. We're still trying to individuate and liberate no matter which one of these 4 phases we look at. But this last quarter is more about bringing up trauma to heal. The first quarter is a little more about breaking free and moving forward. And of course, we got past those first quarter squares here in 2012 to 2015. Again, I reviewed part 1 cycles if you want to know more about these 7 biseptile aspects that Uranus is going to make to Pluto between 2018 and 2021. I'll also be doing some EA Zoom webinars on these biseptiles as well if you belong to their Facebook group. Okay, so Uranus and Taurus transiting through the 9th house. Here we're looking at the active polarity, which is energy moving outward from the center. We're looking at that mutable modality, which is flexibility, going with the flow, kind of being able to put everything from the cardinal and fixed modalities all together into one larger understanding for each quarter of the circle. And we have the element of fire, which is spirit, which is that spark of destiny. And when we look at it through the 9th house and Sagittarius, it is more along the lines of trying to put our world together philosophically. And depending upon how secure or insecure we are, we can, on the insecure side, really get involved in, I'm right, you're wrong. The more inwardly secure we are, the more open we can be with that Taurian energy to be secure and still want to question everything around us. Now, as Uranus comes along and transits through Taurus across that 9th house, it will expose any security issues that revolve around quote unquote, living the lie versus standing or evolving our own intuition and relationship with the universe along with that. Now, I like to point out here, I put this living a lie in quotes because I'm talking about it from a figurative basis. It's an interesting mix with Taurus and ninth house because that ninth house wants all this freedom. It wants to explore, move, travel. And Taurus wants all the security. So they go back and forth with each other. And when anything that revolves around that freedom to explore threatens the Taurian security, then we get caught up in wanting to be possessive or secure with what Taurus has done to this point, and we'll start compromising on ourselves in order to be secure. And so Uranus is going to come along and bust the lie, expose any of the security issues that we are clinging to in order to be comfortable, so to speak. And as Uranus has a tendency to do, it just opens up all kinds of things into our consciousness from the individuated unconsciousness. So the ninth house is going to have all of these new thoughts, new ideas, old memories. It's going to have all kinds of things coming up, and being so right brain orientated with this house, we will take in what makes us feel comfortable. We'll reject what makes us feel insecure. And so this is going to be a question of how well can you be open-minded as Uranus shakes things up. And it's going to shake up what we know as truth for us, which EA will sometimes call a limited personal truth. We all have our personal truth, our individual perspective of truth. It may or may not be open to universal timeless truth. And this transit is probably going to expose anywhere our version of personal truth is limited. And if you think about the example that I always like to give of dropping the pebble into the pond and the ripples just keep going larger and larger and larger circles, and how far out can you go in your understanding of something? So we'll all probably have our beliefs exposed, triggered, upset, some degree if you have this house transit. So if you have any religious and or spiritual limitations, again, that you may be personally clinging to, they are going to get rocked. And they're going to get exposed. And you're going to have to go through that Uranian insecurity of trying to put a larger picture and a larger understanding of your world together. And this is going to shake up your value system. How is that going to evolve? And being Taurus, those values will have something to do with your resources. We'll look at this more in just a little bit. So what can really start to happen with this house transit is security versus freedom. What, again, makes us feel insecure, we reject. And yet, active polarity, fire house, Uranus, we want to be free. We want to liberate. And so the degree to which we can be open to this whole perspective of liberation will tell us the degree to which we have really been working upon our inner security in the past. You know, the degree to which we resist freedom, that we want to be secure, will show us the degree to which we feel inwardly insecure and not open to freedom. So it's going to be a balancing act that will probably ebb, flow. We explore till we feel insecure, then we back off and hopefully create a deeper, broader level of self-reliance, especially the philosophical understanding of that, feeling that inwardly. Then we go back out and try to explore and be free until we're triggered again. So we'll go out and in and out and in. And, you know, ultimately here, we're looking for that self-reliance to be a group of one. Uranus is always looking for its like-minded friends. Here we're going to be looking for them from the perspective of our beliefs. Can we stand in our own beliefs? Can we walk our own talk? Can we stand in what we know to be our truth, all on our own? That it will be one of the directions that we want to evolve towards. Leroy, if I could interrupt you, honey, I forgot to bring myself a water bottle. Would you deliver me a water bottle? Thank you very much.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, thanks. And so we also will then have to look for where we might substitute any excessive need for material possessions for inner security. Again, doesn't matter what house you have Uranus in, you can get caught, excuse me, you can get caught up in having more and more and more material possessions. Ninth house, one of, you know, the examples could be, you know, how expensive of amethyst crystals can I have? You know, have you ever walked into a metaphysical store and just seen those huge diodes of amethyst crystals? Gorgeous, beautiful. And then you look at the price tag. Oh, okay, I think I'll go for something a little smaller. But, you know, anything that can be of a, you know, spiritual searching, you know, one of the other things could be is one more trip, one more pilgrimage to, you know, some metaphysical site across the planet, and I know I'll figure out this inner security thing. So every house, we have to learn how to shift those values in order to do that Taurian simplification in regards to our resources in some way. Here, we're going to also be recognizing the ultimate resource, which is universal source. And it is the source that provides for anything that is manifested on the material plane in the world. And so as we deepen that relationship with understanding the ultimate resource, it can really lessen the fears of having what we need and desire. It can help us be more inwardly secure and recognize everything we may need or desire, we can manifest. And those of you who have been following me along, when I got off the weekend of the holistic fair and my brain wasn't quite gelling so good, I couldn't remember my Louise Hay quote that I've worked with for 30 years. I've added a few words on here, specifically the word desire, but it came to me, of course, after a little rest. Everything I need to know is revealed to me. Just that first phrase is a ninth house Sag phrase. Everything I need to know is revealed to me. And everything I need and desire comes to me in my highest and best time space sequence. There's the Uranus in Taurus mantra for the ninth house and whatever house I used it in a couple of classes ago. This one is just, I mean, I have South Node in Taurus. Again, I have used this mantra for 30 some years. I think the Louise Hay book, I want to say it came out in 1987, and I could be wrong there. You know, you can heal yourself. Is that what that you all probably all know that book. 1987 was when Jeffrey's Pluto Volume 1 came out. And 1987 was when Riane Eisler's The Chalice and the Blade came out. And I want to say Louise Hay's book, You Can Heal Yourself, came out that same year. 1987, the year of the harmonic convergence. But I don't even remember why they called it the harmonic convergence anymore. I just know that this Louise Hay mantra has given me a lot of comfort over the years. And so hopefully, if you are someone who has this Uranus house transit, this is comforting to you. It can be comforting to everybody through Uranus in Taurus, but probably getting the essence here, you know, anything in the manifested world is going to be reflection of what our beliefs are. And Uranus is going to shake up those beliefs with the intent of broadening them and helping you understand things from a more natural law perspective. And universal natural laws are always found in nature through observation, correlation. You don't necessarily need a book or a building or a mentor. You can use all of them as long as you don't make them substitutes. If you make the book or the building or the mentor or guru or the material, you know, possessions, substitutes for your beliefs, Uranus will shake it up and reveal it to you. And of course, all the way through Uranus and Taurus, no matter what the house is, we are going to be simplifying our material needs. And in this case, we will do it as we spiritualize our values. We will spiritualize those values regardless of whether we are consensus individuating or spirituating consciousness. Now, of course, Uranus ruling trauma, we can bring up a lot of memory around any traumas where we were persecuted for spiritual or religious reasons, specifically around all the patriarchal distortions. This is the ninth house square to the 6th and 12th. That Virgo Pisces, where EA looks at the patriarchal distortions, especially with religion, as well as looking at what is natural law. The mutable modality is where we search for that. So Uranus can bring up these memories. It could bring about some re-imprinting of persecution trauma, and any re-imprinting is also serving to help us become more conscious and then be able to make some level of understanding it and grounding ourselves in self-reliance versus feeling more and more traumatized or more and more stuck in the traumas. So all kinds of scenarios that can come up around this, especially if you also have planets, Taurus, ninth house, that would describe some of the details around any of that. But the details will be unique again to each chart you would look at with somebody who has this house transit. So there's an interesting blend here between metaphysical and physical. And we could see ourselves as we're healing any of these persecution traumas. You could return to being a healer, teacher here. You could be sparking with how you could take care of your survival and flourishing needs by being a teacher in some way. And I use that teacher word figuratively as well, because you could be the writer, you could be the speaker. I mean, the different ways that you could be one who shares knowledge. You could liberate yourself into being the teacher slash guru. And again, then to the degree that you have been working on the inner security, having the degree to which you can be creating resources for yourself and creating resources that have real value to you versus accumulating more stuff. And if we start to look at the whole issue of sexuality here, one of the biggest things that we'll be looking at is the whole perspective of sexual honesty. Just like we will have to be honest with ourselves with where we're compensating or quote unquote living the lie in our world rather than standing in our truth with what we deeply value, we can look at, the sexual lie, the dishonesty we tell ourselves, and therefore the dishonesty we tell others as well. And so Uranus will expose the sexual lies. Now, if we're working to be as honest and inwardly secure with ourselves as we possibly can sexually, if we're working to heal any layers or levels of persecution traumas that come up, many times sexuality can be involved with that. And if we're working to heal in all those areas, we could even have ourselves being the sexual teacher. At the very simplest, healing our own sexual wounds and taking care of our own sexual needs. But we could be having some type of breakthroughs around that, Uranus, and we could become the teacher of this somehow, some way with the ninth house transit. Distortions, we could stay stuck in the lie. We could continue to compensate ourselves on ourselves, which could create more Uranian upsets. And then we could re-imprint the traumas without doing any work to heal them. We could want to stay stuck in our little security bubble. I don't want to look at the things that Uranus is triggering into my consciousness. And as many of us know, if we're not paying attention to that element of the future messaging that starts to come again, if we're not moving forward in that direction, sooner or later it almost always creates the cataclysm. And after the storm has passed, we're like, oh man, yeah, I was getting a message, but I just didn't pay attention, or I was too afraid to move. So if we want to stay stuck in any thorium bubbles for security reasons, Uranus can also create that cataclysm. And then we can stick to any righteousness distortions. My beliefs are better than your beliefs. My God is better than your God. Again, saying this figuratively. We've gotten so far along that understanding on religious, spiritual terms, and then we slow down and stop Taurus to be secure, and we want to stay right there, don't want to grow anymore. Uranus will come along and blow it up in our face and expose something again about our beliefs that is not universal, timeless truth and understanding. All right. If you have any areas where I didn't discuss an archetype, by all means, you can type it into the Q&A board. Leroy will answer questions for you, or he will speak up or unmute you to have you interact in any way you want. And so I'm going to move on to our volunteer for the ninth house. And I don't know if I told you who that was, Leroy. Do you have your handy dandy sheet? I left it downstairs. I didn't bring the volunteer sheet up. Okay. So I will start to just bring across some of the aspects that we have going on here with our volunteer while
Can we
I'm
do a mic
waiting
check with
for.
our volunteer, Kim? Are you there,
Okay.
volunteer?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Yes. Very well, volunteer. Thank you very much for coming on board. Appreciate that. And thank you for answering my question in regards to Central Standard Time or daylight time. And for those of you who are budding astrologers, the state of Illinois, there was a time period where it created a lot of confusion in the recording of birth data. And so one of the things we'll do is really question Illinois births sometimes when they're in the summer. I think by the time we got to the middle 1960s, I think we got pretty standardized. But if you have any births from Illinois before the middle 60s, just really double checking that could be a real good thing to do. Volunteer, I'm going to give you environmental conditionings really quick, okay? Um,
Yes.
you were raised middle class near a big city. You were brought up more or less in a liberal church, kind of casually. Your father was quite conservative. Mom was kind yet distant. You had an older brother who made some sexual advances when you reached puberty. You rejected him. It had an effect of kind of creating some distance in the relationship. You're in your second marriage, which I think has been going on for many years. There's been some stress in the last few years because hubby's conservative and he voted for somebody whose name we're not going to mention. You went through what I went through with my mother.
It's horrifying.
Oh gosh, my liberal, spiritually exploring mother got, brainwashed in
Mm,
2016.
mm,
Um, You could not have children, so you have two adopted Chinese children. They're young adults. You have a daughter and a son. You've been a massage therapist for over 3 decades. You have a history of lots of metaphysical studies. And of course, you've been studying astrology since you were in your teens. Um, you have a very active Uranus. You have Uranus aspecting 8 different planets if we include Chiron and the nodal axis in your chart. Uranus has your natal Uranus has a nice grand trine here in the chart in the fire signs. Of course, you see the conjunction that comes through with the sun, all right? Even Mercury to some degree, although this is not considered an aspect to Uranus. Uranus and Mars are in a sesquisquadrate, waning sesquisquadrate aspect as well. Uranus is in a, your Jupiter's in a waxing semi-sextile to Uranus. And of course, Uranus has the square, last quarter square to Neptune, all right? And let's see here. And then there was, you're part of that good old Chiron Uranus opposition. Mini generation, or should I say multi generations, because they were like, I want to say 41 Chiron Uranus exact oppositions. Yeah, so volunteer, you have had Uranus in your 9th house for a year or two, even though it's been into Aries. So you're welcome to share any of those Arian insights if you'd like to. And then we'll get in and start exploring between that natal Uranus and the evolving transits. So as you were looking at the slides from before, anything sparking for you as Uranus has just entered that 9th house?
Well, you know what I really related to was the security versus freedom aspect. And I can't really say that it's new for me, but it has intensified. And it has gotten my mind all wound up. And so I've really got the message, especially this last weekend, of the need of the balance, because with that South Node in Gemini and Venus in Gemini, I love to study and I love to learn new things. And I have to balance that with a daily routine that when I do it, I remain pretty centered. And that involves meditation and balancing my own energies. And when I do that, I can maintain a really nice energy and perspective. But I've noticed that that's been a little bit more difficult of late, to the point where I just kind of had to shut everything down this last weekend and really get quiet all weekend, because I had become fairly imbalanced with all of these wonderful things that I want to learn and explore.
Not to mention Mercury direct.
And the new moon.
And the new moon. As a little side note, according to the recording of this class, I mean, I don't think you're breathing air if you got through this weekend without noticing Mercury stationary direct in Aries and, just the chaos. Even today, that was the same thing with Leroy and I came through fairly smooth, although it was up and down over the weekend. It was fairly smooth. Leroy was fit to be tied today, trying to do some technical stuff, and I finally said, "Okay, time for a walk." So yes, ninth house, time for a walk, time for meditation, time to really be able to balance that Uranian chaos that it can bring. And of course, Uranus in the tail end of Aries and the new moon, there as well, and all that taking place in your ninth house. We can really see, how it was triggering things for you. It's quite possible that when Uranus goes into Taurus, you'll have an easier handle of that freedom versus security ebb and flow, maybe being a little more manageable than, say, Aries on the ninth house cusp energy with Uranus. And of course, for you personally, what are we looking at here? You're getting ready to have your Uranus last quarter square. Uranus is going to go retrograde August 7th, 2 degrees Taurus, 34 minutes. So there is the possibility that you're only going to have one last quarter square. Wouldn't that be nice? I'll look that up while we're talking, because Uranus, by its transits, it doesn't always go over every degree or minutes of a degree 3 times. So, sometimes Uranus actually will just kind of touch something once and move on. And so, hold on, let me see if that is the case for you. Oh, guess what, sweetie? Uranus is going to go stationary direct in 2020 all the way back to 2 degrees 39 minutes.
Oh, so close.
So you're going to feel it 2018 and you're going to then you're going to get it 3 times in 2019, 2020. Okay. And let's see, 2019, I forgot to look. While we're at it. Oh, yep. And it will then square your sun 3 times, 2019, 2020 as well. Okay.
Yay.
So just the fact that you've got those 3 planets there in the 12th house and that Uranian stellium, it's real interesting mixes of signs and houses here in which you really want to be working with inner security through this Uranus 9th house transit. Because last quarter squares, crises in consciousness, it initiates that whole, last 90 degrees of the circle, which is, returning to source, which is, resolving karma, which is what we talked about theoretically with that Uranus Pluto slide, or a few slides ago. And so the deeper you are with your spiritual practices, okay, the more you will move through any Uranian chaos that comes up. And then the more that you, on a personal level, can be open to receiving whatever creativity those Leo planets in the 12th want to bring through. As I say a lot of the time, the Pluto and Leo generation is not a typical retiree. If they work an 8 to 5 job, when they retire, it's just, oh, goody, goody, goody. Now what do I get to creatively do that I have been wanting to do forever? And so that could be a lot of this energy that's coming through and sparking for you. You know, so after 30 plus years of doing in massage, is there something else you want to do? Is there another tool you want to put in your toolbox? Yes, I think Uranus will still have you from time to time, you know, continuing to study. All right. You're not going to uh, let that up. And, you know, Jupiter square the nodes, you know, is part of this Uranus transit that you're going to have as well through the ninth house. And Jupiter's going to want to continue to, you know, apply itself to learning new things as well, and coming forth on some healing levels. So it's quite possible for you that, again, it's where is the teacher going to come out? What are the tools that you're going to add into or add on to your toolbox that continues to allow you to share what you're learning? Do you get any future-oriented messages about writing, speaking, anything along that ninth house, you know, spectrum?
Well, yes, I'm just embarking on a new, talk about new tool. I'm going to be, I don't know how far I'll go with it, but I'm starting an energy medicine course, which has me pretty excited because being a massage therapist, I've worked with the physical body for 30 plus years, but I've always had my my finger, if you will, in acupressure and Reiki in energy medicine. But this is taking it to a whole nother level where I want to affect the whole system before it even becomes physical. So from the energetic standpoint, which I think is the medicine of the future, or one of the medicines of the future.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that's pretty exciting. So I have been, I educate my clients when they come in on different techniques that they can do to start to move energy, and talk about self-reliance is that one of my passions is for people to learn to take care of themselves so that they're not reliant on what I would think is the last resort, which is seeing a Western medical doctor and taking and getting drugs or surgery. You know, so much can be prevented before you even have to get to that point, which I'm very grateful that we do have that option, because my life was saved by it this time. So I'm not going to diss it, but I just think that it is inappropriately used most of the time. So even if I just do it with my clients, I want to educate them on you can take control of your health to a certain extent. There are things that you can do to shift your energy so that you're supporting yourself. So I didn't think about that until I'm just talking, but sort of I'm passionate about helping people become self-reliant with their health.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I can see you with the Uranus, you know, transit as it goes into Taurus. Even the last quarter square, you know, we'll tend to look at, you know, squares and oppositions as quote unquote negative. And to me, what I love about the cycle of phases and aspects 360 is that anything can be used or abused. So it's just how are you choosing to play with that energy? And if you really look at these last quarter squares into Leo 12th house, Here can be you really sparking Leo on all of that 12th house non-physical energy. So you can be waking up more and more to where, again, ultimate resource is source. Ultimate source from anything we manifest, be it an imbalance or disease, or be it a healing or, money in the bank account, it all comes from the ultimate here. And so you can have all kinds of intuitive sparks that can come from this Uranus transit of how we get from non-physical to manifested. I don't know. Didn't you participate in the Chiron series?
I didn't. Bummer.
Okay.
I was bummed.
That's okay. Even if you just review the Chiron in Aries archetypes and cycles, because one of the things that I've always said before any physical manifestation, behind any physical manifestation is crystallized emotions. Behind the crystallized emotions are the distorted thoughts and mental patterns. And behind that is the spiritual disconnect to source. So all healing starts energetically. It starts with some connection to source, which then affects our mental thought patterns, and beliefs are nothing more than conditioned thoughts, which then brings about healing in the emotional level, which then brings about the release and healing on the physical. So I'm a stickler for spiritual, mental, emotional, physical, or what I call SMEP. And so when we can recognize that is the direction we go, manifesting the imbalance and manifesting the healing, then we want to be healing it on all 4 levels, no matter which level it's manifested on. So just a little recap for you in regards to this whole thing of how do we go from the Taurian manifestations, all the way to the source of where it comes from.
Yeah, I did misunderstood you. I was not a volunteer for Chiron, but I was there during the whole Chiron series. And
got it.
And I remember you saying that and going, Totally agree.
And you remember me then saying this body, mind, spirit, phrase. I want to go body, heart, mind, spirit.
Yeah. Yeah, because the heart, that's the middle,
connector.
if you will. Yes.
Connector between the physical and non-physical.
Yes.
And so as you have this Uranian transit, Taurus 9th house, you can be one of those messengers as well.
I'm trying, Kim Marie.
Oh, well, sorry. Thank you for letting me just kind of sidetrack here. But we are, with this house transit, we're looking, well, it's physical. I can see it. What do you mean it's not, not real? I want to change it physically. And the 9th house has to get, but where did that manifestation come from? So that whole E equals MC squared. You do not destroy energy, you just change its form. And that's one of the big ahas that this house transit can recognize.
Well, yeah, I had an inkling of it several years ago when I was attending lectures from a Swami, and he asked me, he said, well, does the body project the aura or does the aura project the body? And I looked at him and the light bulb went out and I went, well, the aura projects the body. and
Mm-hmm.
got it right there. And I've been playing with that idea now for several years. And, just that question and the seeking in my mind has brought me um, uh, a Qigong practice and the opening to the energy medicine technique that I'm going to learn.
Mm-hmm. There you go. So, as we were talking with one of those slides, that long-term potential, for metamorphosing how we create resources, I think Uranus can just spark you in several ways. What, if we relate to that ruler of the ninth house here being Jupiter, square these nodes, and the south node in the 10th is the resolution node.
Mm-hmm.
You yourself said, I just want to study it all. And for Uranus to have real integration, which it needs when it skips steps, there has to be a Gemini choice to 10th house focus. And as you do that, and this awakening to this whole broad field of energy medicine between physical metaphysical, I think that you will really metamorphose your work. Uranus can just open up sparks for you with clients left and right. And ninth house ruling language, sometimes you'll just have so much coming through here, okay, on a fire/spiritual mental Uranus level, that it can be, oh my gosh, how do I get this out? How do I speak it? How do I how do I find the language to help someone understand what I'm experiencing in my world?
And I've really noticed that with myself about the open-mindedness that you talked about, and helping people who are not of the mind, you know, uh, you know, um, of that there exists an aura and there are the chakras and the meridians flow, and being okay with being in the last month being called radical and kind of out there.
By the clients who just want body relief.
Well, but they like it, but they want it at the same time. So I'm okay with being called radical and out there. It doesn't bother me. But to and my clients kind of know me, but it put the shining on there. Right, Adele, you can't talk to everybody the same way you talk to some people. And how do you reach the people who don't have the open-mindedness
Mm-hmm.
there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. How do you drop it down to the next simplification of the phase, which is body-mind connection?
Mm-hmm.
And as we know from the perspective of EA, this is all the way back to the beginning of the Piscean age, even maybe back to the Aries age, where, the Garden of Eden myth was the separation of spirit and flesh. Flesh being the physical, emotional senses, and spirit being that mental, spiritual body. So when you go body mind, which of course, even in our consensus world, they're starting, to recognize body mind connection. There can sometimes just, you don't even have to use the word Garden of Eden myth. You don't have to use that phrase, but well, body mind, have you ever felt your body have some type of visceral reaction as something hit you emotionally, that emotional mental body is pretty closely, connected to each
Mm.
other.
Mm-hmm.
And then, the mind, well, we can change our thoughts to change our beliefs. There are some who think that beliefs are conditioned thoughts. And then finding that gentle way to say it to them. And so, there's some simplification of languaging that's kind of opening them up, Uranus. And so yeah, you could find, and South Node in Gemini, the nodes in Gemini Sag, you've you've got it within you, even with Jupiter square the nodes. You have got it within you to find that way to, help others understand things from broader perspectives as Uranus goes through this ninth house.
Yeah, that's my wish is, um, and this is even, my fantasy is really being able to get into the elementary schools and help these kids right from the get-go so they don't have to learn it when they're, that changing a habit when you're older is a heck of a lot harder than, you know, um, using the tapping techniques or the energetic balancing, the educational kinesiology in the classroom has just been miraculous to helping the kids get settled down and learning.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if I'll ever get there, but it sure would be nice to catch them when they're young.
Mm-hmm. Oh, totally. How many astrologers wish we had basic education based upon Mercury retrograde? I'm not giving up. And no matter how long it takes, so sooner or later we get there.
Mm-hmm.
You can suppress and distort natural law, but you can't destroy it.
Exactly. It always shows up in your face whether you want it to or not.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So knowing this whole kind of archetype of compensation with the ninth house when, it's too um, insecure, scary, or just, a little discomforting to really stand in that absolute truth. Some way, some level, Uranus is going to be opening that up for you and have you searching for, you know, your ability to speak your truth more and more, and then your ability to stand in and live your truth more and more. And this will also relate back to this natal signature here. Okay. Leo Pisces is such an interesting mix. They're the inconjunct in a natural wheel. All right. And, Leo is like, who will see me? Here I am. And the 12th house is like, I'm invisible. And so just those signatures right there, from the natal chart perspective, has had you going back and forth between, again, on the ultimate level, that says, I must see myself first, and then others will see me. That's the deeper lesson there. But as you recognize that more and more, this Uranus last quarter square to all these Leo planets over the next 7 years will have that kind of energy coming out where there is no hiding. There is less and less compromising on how truthful you can be with yourself and with others. How many more times can somebody call you radical? Uh-huh. You know, something that I was seeing as we're looking at Uranus finishing up in Aries, okay, and it's past it by degree. It was last year that it was sparked the most, but you realize that transiting Uranus had created a yod with Saturn, Venus. Have you seen this in your chart? Did you notice this in your chart yet? Yeah.
I think I did see that, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I experienced that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so even Uranus here in Aries, as it went into this ninth house, you know, the inner emotional adjustments that you were making, and maybe even literally adjustments with family, spouse, Scorpio, children, fourth house, parenting, Saturn, the adjustments you were making as you had to break free and individualize in some way. And this could also be, you know, describing the whole, I want to study more. You know, Venus is the ruler over here in Taurus as it moves out of that yacht in the next year or two. It's, you know, the transit of Uranus Taurus is going to be, you know, activating this Venus. So you've had perhaps a little discomfort with family of origin, as you have said, Mom might be taking a little more time for me again.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Yes, dinner has been, of course, the biggest issue.
You're Saturn in the fourth house.
But they're coming around. They're coming around. My daughter's gone. She would have no trouble, but it's my son and my husband, and they have a tendency to act like the kitchen is completely foreign to them.
Yeah, they're starving, huh? Oh, well, Uranus in Taurus, I guess you'll figure it out if you get hungry enough.
Exactly. And over the last year, they've come along, and I think they're doing very well right now.
Hey, by the way, ninth house is one of the houses of humor, okay? There's multiple houses of humor, but you know, the ninth house Sag perspective is, oh well, you know, or so sad, too bad. What are you going to do about it? Oh, comments from anybody else on the board who may be listening. You know, Uranus has also done this opposition here to this natal Neptune in Libra, which also rules Uranus here by house. You know, so this has been, you know, almost like activating, you know, some healthier relationships here as it finishes up in Aries opposing that Neptune, you know, to the point that they're going, where's mom? You know, she ran away again, ninth house. Oh, thank you for laughing. Okay.
Well,
Comments?
it
Go
also
ahead.
trined my natal Pluto as well.
Which was also sparking the creativity.
Mm.
So Uranus moving into Taurus, there's kind of almost like a settling down to all the creative sparks that have come with late Aries. And this can be true for all of us generically. You know, we've had 7 years of Uranus sparking initiations for all of us on individual levels. And so as Uranus dips into Taurus, then goes back to Aries for the last 6 months here, late 18 into 19, all right? It's like the final sparking of what we now want to help survive in Taurus, what we then also just kind of have to, again, settle down and do the methodical earth element Taurus, one foot in front of another. If I don't put sustained effort into the new beginnings that have sparked, they won't necessarily survive. I mean, just think about that from a collective perspective, and the whole shock of how the US presidential election went. How many of us were waiting for the Uranus waxing Pluto squares to, kind of liberate us moving forward into natural law? And we had that pendulum swing that, probably rocked many of us for months.
Mm.
And then we kind of, had those reflections. And now, as Uranus is going to make those biseptiles to Pluto, can we really settle into sustaining the progressive sparks that have come, politically, socially, financially, with what they call the $15 living wage, so we're all going to be doing that Uranus and Taurus methodical step by step to sustain the sparks, and we're also going to be doing it collectively. And that Uranus biseptile Pluto collectively is my hope that we're going to, again, have some realignments more to a natural law, inclusive, giving, sharing, including perspective. Do you know that the House of Representatives in the U.S. Introduced a bill for a balanced budget? This is the next thing. We've never had a constitutional convention, and this is something that could be possible. Pluto in Capricorn, balsamic, the U.S. natal Pluto. It takes something like 34 states to pass resolutions to have a constitutional convention. So in addition to doing it via Congress, if we had enough of the states decide to do that, they could pass an amendment via constitutional convention to balance the federal budget, because the 1-2-step plan on the conservative side was to pass the tax cuts, to give all the millionaires and billionaires a break. They know that it was not going to create enough economic development to balance the budget, but they wanted that law passed first so that then they could go to part 2, which was literally gut all of the social support programs. And that includes privatizing Social Security. So talk about some Uranus, ninth house, facts and truths. I think we have Republicans control 32 gubernatorial ships, and I don't know if they control all of those state legislatures. So they've gotten extremely close to a constitutional convention. And it's not that you couldn't do it on the liberal side as well. It depends upon the resolution. The whole biggest energy towards a constitutional convention has been a single issue resolution: balanced federal budget. And there's a slang for it. I don't remember what it is. Rather than states, 34 states passing resolutions that say, we want to revisit the entire Constitution. We want a constitutional convention to create nonpartisan redistricting of the congressional districts, or et cetera, et cetera. This is how close they have come to really you know, ripping up the social fabric of the United States. So don't sit on your laurels if you think we're going to have a progressive swing in 2018. I think we will, but it will depend upon the degree to which we have that Uranus and Taurus sustained activism. And oh, by the way, go back to part 1, Uranus and Taurus cycles. Election day, Uranus will literally square the nodes as Venus is retrograde, opposing Uranus, and in the middle of squaring the nodes 3 times. When I looked at the United States election chart, and I looked at the chart for the Republican Party, which has natal Uranus and Taurus. They're going to have their second Uranian return since the initiation of the party. I have hope. But for those of you who are listening, again, don't rest on the 9th house laurels. Oh, everybody will understand. Everybody gets it. No. Uranus and Taurus is sustained effort and sustained effort, whichever perspective you want to move towards. That was a little side trip, everybody. There was the 9th house Uranus and Taurus philosophy. Thanks, volunteer, for letting me get that in.
It was wonderful.
Any questions from our volunteer?
No, it was wonderful information, and that I think will be very useful for me during this transit.
Well, stay tuned because I'm going to use your chart in the 10th house as well, okay?
Oh, okay.
I don't have a specific volunteer, but I do have 2 charts that I'm going to use. But let me just check in with Leroy as I take a drink of water. Any comments or questions from the board? Anybody?
No, you're clear on the board, and thank you to our volunteer.
All right. Yes, thank you. And thank you, everyone, for allowing me to just get a few little Uranus and Taurus sustainment tidbits in there. Let's move on then and look at Uranus and Taurus transiting through the 10th house. And here we're going to be looking at passive polarity, which of course is energy returning back to the center. We're going to be looking at the cardinal modality, which is initiation, typically 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We initiate, feel insecure, and then we regroup back to what makes us feel secure. Or feel insecure, regroup to being secure. I don't remember what I said there. And then, of course, we're going to have a double earth element here. Capricorn and the 10th house is the earth element. And while we look at Taurus in the 2nd as developing the new talents, expanding the talents we have to better survive food, clothing, shelter, and flourish beyond the essentials and basics. We look at Virgo in the 6th house as that routine or day-to-day effort we make in the world of resources and physical manifestations. And if we work with both of those earth elements, when we get to Capricorn in the 10th house, we can get to the accumulation of resources. And so as we look at Uranus then going through that 10th house in Taurus, there can be an emphasis between resource ups and downs. And it will very much depend upon any prior efforts we've made with manifesting resources as to how it turns out. And it will also have a lot to do with the ethics of the efforts that we have made. And so this Uranus Taurus transit will expose any of those outer insecurities, that will reinforce inner security lessons. So if we're consensus and we have, built up all kinds of money or stuff, and if we are too overly attached to our stuff, makes us secure, we could have it taken away. We could have it wiped out away from us. I have no idea what Kim Kardashian's chart is, but she popped into my mind. Remember, she's the one married to Kanye West. Remember a year or two ago, she was, the Kardashians are the, talk about a family that's out there broadcasting to the world, 10th house, look at me and my stuff, look at all my clothes, look at all my jewelry, look at all this and that. Remember, she was in Paris for some type of fashion show, and she was posting all over on social media, and she got kidnapped, I think it was. They broke into her hotel room and robbed her of all her jewelry, and she literally thought she was going to die. That is the type of thing that Uranus can bring to Taurus and 10th house. It can literally drop you down to those life or death situations where it's like, I can have all the money in the world. That doesn't mean that I'm going to live or be healthy or survive. So again, exposure of all the ways security is attached outside of ourselves, and those outer security attachments are shook up to reinforce inner security, that 4th house Scorpio polarity. Now, if we have, used our power to accumulate that stuff in underhanded ways, sometimes when a slower moving planet moves through the 10th house, it creates those classic falls from grace. Same lesson, transfer from outer to inner security. Wouldn't be unusual here to see job losses or upsets. To again, I am more than my social position. I am more than my stuff, to reinforce that inner security. So material possessions, resources, money, it can go up, down, up, down, up, down, all over the place. And so there will be these lessons of learning to create a social position and career, or evolving the career moves, learning to do it through the deepest level of inner self-reliance, Uranus in Taurus. And so as Uranus shakes all that up in the outer world, it's really trying to get us to take charge of our life on every level, not just taking charge of it physically, but my SMEP, spiritual, mental, emotional, and physical. And Uranus could be sparking us mentally of recognizing from inner security and inner self-reliance that inner creates the outer. And it, really does that on some of the deepest, broadest levels. When we come from that consensus perspective that security lies outside of us, we can create it. And we can create a lot of resources for a lifetime or 2 or 3. But sooner or later, it can get ripped away. 4th house Scorpio polarity. Because sooner or later, we've got to learn the lesson of inner self-reliance. So we want to be making every effort to do that with this 10th house transit. And essentially, it's just having us reevaluate our relationship to resources all over the place, from little ways to big ways. You know, from I'm going to, recycle better so I'm not so wasteful with plastic, all the way up to, I really don't need this, yacht that I use twice a year. From, every degree, every level, every perspective. Uranus and Taurus through the 10th will bring about reevaluating our priorities and what's really important to us in regards to resources. Now, from some of the healthy perspectives here, there can be a generosity with resources here. If we've really developed that inner security and we recognize where the ultimate source of resources come from, we then recognize that it can flow. It can flow through us. We are a channel for the ultimate resource to come through us. And so it creates a natural willingness to, giving, sharing, including. So there can be a natural generosity. And again, it will, vary as to the, degree of resources we have to share. It's not, how many zeros are behind the dollar sign. It's, the effort that you make to share resources. It can be as simple as creating, I think they call them food libraries. I don't know what they call them for sure, but if you've seen it on Facebook where they take those, you think of your mailbox out, on the front of your home. If you live in a home instead of apartment building, you think they build these little boxes, and they put them out along the street, and there will be people that stack them with canned goods or non-perishable food, and you take it as you need it. It can be as simple as something like that. I have enough to share in that way, so I'm going to. Basically, this is going to create that long-term potential to develop new talents into jobs, career, and resource accumulation. This is going to be the potential to really rebirth the world of career, providing we're not 92. Okay, not to say that we can't have the sparks at 92 of what we want to do next time around. We can. And it doesn't always have to be new talents. It can just be the expansion of what we already have as talents. But Uranus is going to shake it up. And as we deepen that, inner self-reliance, then, ultimately we can create the resources, especially as we recognize their ebb and flow. We can allow it to move through us. Of course, this transit is always going to also bring up any areas of family karma and wounding. In this case, especially around resources. So Uranus in Taurus can expose the family karma around resources, who controls what. It wants to bring about healing, may not necessarily be controlled. I mean, it may not necessarily be something that's achieved, but that would be one of the intents around it. A lot of it will be about teaching fiscal self-responsibility all through the generations. Maybe you have an older generation that was quite successful, and the second generation didn't have to do anything at all to receive the resources, and they squandered it all. Maybe you have someone who has all kinds of resources and they won't share a penny. Leroy and I watched the movie recently, All the Money in the World. It was about the Getty family and the Getty grandson who was kidnapped in the 70s and had his ear cut off by those who were asking for a ransom. And the senior Getty, who created all that money from getting the oil out of Saudi Arabia. I did not know that that's where the Getty fortune came from. Anyway, he was the wealthiest man in the world up to that point and had an art collection which was unbelievable, and refused to pay the ransom because if he paid it for one grandchild, he'd have to pay it for all 14 of them. It was a real interesting thing. Lots of themes that went on in the whole family of origin issue. But the point is, you can have someone who has resources that just refuses to share it all, when perhaps younger generations are making all the necessary efforts. And who knows what the karma will be. It might, it's going to be unique to each chart of those involved. So you can see, the point is, you can see all kinds of different variables, how we can have family karma around resources. And perhaps, the authoritarian parent, most likely males, having their own wounds around it, and not sharing, oversharing. Again, somehow, some way, everybody's going to be needing to learn that fiscal self-responsibility. And then to the degree in which that is done, then can there be some equitable sharing of the resources in some way. When it comes to the Taurian sexual issues, it's going to be sexual self-responsibility here. And what we could have going on via 10th house suppression is denial of sexuality. I don't have any sexual needs. Or controlling the sexuality. And the controlling of sexuality, if they're in partnerships, can be relative to the degree that they have fear of vulnerability, because 4th house Scorpio polarity is double water. So, this really brings up all the emotional self-reliance issues. And if there's extreme fears of vulnerability, double Earth, Taurus 10th, they can be quite controlling around all of the sexual issues. We could also have the you know, the sexual distortions of incest, depending upon whether the individual with this signature is a child or whether it is a wounded parent, or whether they came up in an environment in which their parents were wounded. Variables can be all over the place in regards to this. Some of the distortions we could see here is, an inability or refusal to accept self-responsibility. You could have the laziness and inertia with Taurus on the 10th house. What do you mean I can't sit on the couch and just have you give me a gift of resources whenever I want them? The good old end justifies the means that we talked about, where they can use all of the manipulations to get to the top, to get the resources. You can have a lot of social class judgments here. This can come from 10th house, and if the individual has it themselves or they were born into a family that has extremes of wealth, they can have a lot of judgments around others that do not have as much. They can get very, very materialistic and physical here. And again, racing to the material top. I need more, I need more, I need more, I need more to feel secure, to prove that I'm somebody. We talked about a little bit of the familial resource karma that can go on, all the control issues. Taurus on the 10th house can be one of those signatures for prostitution. We could see something going on in regards to that level with this signature. And if that's the case and Uranus is transiting through the 10th house, they could be exposed for that. They could end up in jail in many countries because it's not necessarily legal to be able to do that. All right, so anything you think I'm not remembering to mention, you can sure say this for me. With our volunteer, we don't have our volunteer with this transit coming along next, but if I would carry it forward from some of the comments that she had said, if there is that 9th house Taurus sustained effort with the expansion of her studies, you could see Uranus go over her 10th house cusp, and she could really have the possibility of, sudden expansion in her work, as again, she has added on these new tools coming off of the 9th house. And to the degree that she would continue to balance the inner security, especially in regards to the fact that she has the Saturn signature here and the North Node evolution of the emotional egoic development down here in the 4th house. To the degree that she worked on sustaining those, then that could help the inner create the outer. Something else that could come with Uranus and Taurus moving through the 10th house, if we're of the age where we still have parents that are living, it could bring about the crossover of a parent or even parents into the spirit world with this transit, Uranus, Taurus, 10th house. You know, there could be reviews of any of the issues with the family of origin. Specific to this volunteer, remember when she was a young adult teenager, the older brother made some sexual advances and she rejected him, but it really affected their relationship going forward. In her case, maybe something will cycle back around. I mean, the ultimate would be the brother being able to say, I'm sorry, please forgive me. For her, it could, you know, especially if I don't remember if the parents are crossed over yet, but you know, if a parent or both would cross over and it came down to um, just her and her brother, you know, possible that she could speak up to him and, you know, in whatever way, take responsibility and, you know, bring the issue up to brother and express whatever she needed to express again, if it was something she felt needed another level of healing in her world. Um, Comments or questions from anybody as I've given this 10th house, these 10th house slides. I think I covered a few archetypes that I could think of, but if there's anything that I haven't mentioned in general, or even specific to this chart, you're welcome to speak up. So, interrupt me, Leroy, if you need to. For many of us, as we work with Uranus and Taurus transit, it almost always is going to cover two houses. And for those of you who have followed through all 12 houses, as you can see, what we learn in one house, if we have, you know, made the effort, it carries forward into helping us expand and then can almost give us a resource, Taurus, of helping us as it moves into that next house. You can see top of the chart, the efforts to focus and sustain some study that would bring in new talents can then definitely lead to the rebirthing of career in some way as it moves into the 10th house. It could lead into the expansion in regards to the accumulation of resources. And I guess I would say, just because we may be individualizing or spiritualizing consciousness within our soul, that doesn't mean we can't accumulate resources. We can accumulate resources in the individuated and spirituated levels of consciousness. Part of the biggest difference is the recognition that this stuff is not my security. I appreciate the manifestation and I appreciate the flow of money and resources, but it is not the source of my security. That's the biggest difference between individualizing and spiritualizing versus being in that consensus world where security is ego driven and usually based outside of self.
Kim, we had a question on
Yes.
the board about adding in Chiron in Aries ingress into this chart. Obviously, that's going to take place in the 8th house. Any comments there?
Is there, well, you know, in general, Chiron moving into Aries with this chart is going to initiate, new levels of emotional healing, okay, and reaching towards inner security versus whatever this individual would be, they're returning and separating desires and forces. Most people on these classes, we're trying to exhaust separating desires, no source. And so it could have them initiating a deeper relationship with universal source, especially to any degree. The intimate relationship may be projected upon and not really serving or satisfying on emotional levels. Okay. If you would have another chart with Chiron in Aries in the 8th house, and they were attached, 8th house, to separating forces, there could be some upsets in that regard to help them try and recognize the difference between separation versus returning. All right. Specific to this individual, you see the Aries signature here. As Chiron gets closer and closer to this moon in Aries, there's going to be a need for deep emotional healing here. And to have partner, 8th house, be able to emotionally acknowledge, recognize them, support them, hold healthy boundaries with the healing. If you relate this back to the natal Chiron signature here, that's retrograde. It's closer to an opposition with Mercury than it is Uranus, but it pulls into opposing all three of these planets. There's a woundedness to the healing and creativity here. There's a woundedness to being the healer, the shaman. And there could be another level of healing taking place, especially as it happens emotionally, that could really spark creativity as a healer. And the Chiron in Aries would want to be empowering the ability to be a healer with Chiron in Aries through this house signature relative to, again, the natal signatures of this chart in question.
Thanks. I didn't want to digress out of it, but we had a question on the board, to backtrack to Chiron and Aries a little bit. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's another one of those charts, as we've done this Chiron series and the Uranus series. It's another one of those charts wherever you see the Chiron Uranus oppositions natally in the chart, your Chiron in Aries is going to want to initiate new levels of healing. And Uranus in Taurus is then going to want to take that into deeper, more grounded levels of self-reliance. So Chiron and Uranus ingresses and then transits can be a 1-2 punch with anybody who has that natal Chiron Uranus opposition. And you would look at that natal opposition by signs and houses, and that would be the starting point to then make it relative to where the transits of Chiron and Uranus are taking place. And if you remember, Chiron is making 26 or 27 waning semi-sextiles to Uranus before they have their conjunctions, 3 conjunctions, 2042, 43, somewhere in Leo, if memory serves me. So Chiron is about halfway, 2/3 of the way through these waning semi-sextiles. I think this year it's going to do number 18 and number 19 relative to 26 or 27. But the waning semi-sextiles, balsamic phase, how are you waking up to heal? How are you waking up to heal? How are you waking up to heal? Chiron balsamic phase semi-sextile to Uranus. Um, Go ahead.
Oh, thanks for that read. That was real clear.
You're welcome. Thanks for the question. With a generic Chiron Uranus answer following the specific one. I wanted to bring in Pope Francis' chart. And it says 9 p.m. and I was trying to look up and see if I've used his chart before, but I didn't find a chart with any closer time. So I'm going to go with the 9 p.m. chart. Let's watch Pope Francis over the next few years. Here we have a natal Uranus in Taurus. He's going to have a Uranus return next year, 2019. And right now, he's going to have through 2018-19, depending upon how close the 9 p.m. is. He's going to have Uranus over the midheaven 3 times. So 2018, 2019, 2020. If that 9 p.m. is close, let's watch what Pope Francis does with the wealth of the Catholic Church. Talk about an accumulation of wealth that could be shared. Let's watch if he makes any changes to the resource acquisitions of the Catholic Church. And let's watch to see what kind of an advocate he may be over the next few years in regard to a more equitable distribution of all of the wealth inequality we see on planet Earth. My ideal would have Pope Francis coming out and saying, every country should use their postal system as a banking utility for the poor, meaning cashing their paychecks without charging them an outrageous fee. You know, Japan has the most successful postal bank in the world. Their post offices all over act like ATMs, helping people on the lower income scale, you know, turn their paycheck into money without, again, outrageous fees and, you know, et cetera, et cetera. My ideal would be for Pope Francis to come out as an advocate that banking itself needs to be a public utility. Those of you who listen to the archetypes and cycles part 1 know that I'm not really a big fan of cryptocurrencies, mainly because they expend a lot of electricity. Secondly, because governments could switch to digital currencies, and if they use the blockchain methodology of cryptocurrencies, they can turn the money on and off as a referee. I'd rather still have a distribution through simple debits and credits of the dollar and the euro and the peso and any other currency you can think of. I would just rather have the currencies switch to public banking rather than private, basically on the method of the Bank of North Dakota over the last 100 years. I refer you to publicbankinginstitute.org. Well, let's see. I expect him to be an advocate of a debt jubilee or redistribution of resources in some way. And hopefully he could be here on planet Earth for a while longer yet. And as we're looking at this grand trine, be a big advocate for, again, redistribution of wealth and resources on planet Earth. You talk about somebody, if this 0 degrees Taurus is correct, you talk about somebody who really, even in consensus, consciousness, has become aware of the ultimate resource of everything, source itself. This is a gentleman who refuses to live in the Vatican with all of its gold and wealth, etc., and lives very simply in a Vatican hotel like everybody else. He's just temporarily there. You know, this is someone who refuses to get caught up in all of the excess wealth trappings. Talk about having the values of living simply and recognizing that wealth cannot be a substitute for that ultimate relationship with source or ultimate security. Stay tuned. We'll find out as the next few years go by. It's my sincere desire that he's here a long time, and his Uranus return doesn't mean he crosses back to spirit world. 10th house, Taurus. All right. Hopefully that's been example for you. With both of these, we have one more class to go, which is going to be next Wednesday in 2 nights, houses 11 and 12. We've got our volunteers. And here's the Saturn series that I did that you can go find on our website. Any of you who did not participate in Capricorn or Chiron in Aries, we have it 30% off through Thursday using the coupon code Chiron at checkout. If you want to go get part 1, archetypes and cycles, and then get your individual house, you can get 30% off. You can get all part 2, any of it, 30% off. Now, here's Jeffrey Green's self-hypnosis tape that has been around forever that I kind of expanded. That I talked about throughout the Chiron in Aries series. And I recognize that with Uranus being the individuated unconsciousness, this is specifically a tool for reprogramming the unconsciousness. So here's part 1, and here is part 2. So you can refer to this later on when Leroy publishes the whole 6-part series, which is how you all will receive this after he is done with them all. I think that's how he does it. I think the webinar service distributes all the PDFs at the end of each series. But again, you have got this in case you want to make your own unconsciousness reprogramming tape. All right, that's everything for this evening. Thank you to our volunteer. Thank you to everyone who showed up. Wishing you all the best through Uranus and Taurus, and I'll see you one more evening in a couple nights. Adios.